So yeah, but hard, that's good enough. Yeah, that's kind of what you want. What we're doing is we're putting this on the kick, right? See what happens. Oh yeah. So you can hear that the bloat of the kick got cleaned up a bit. And that's why you want to individually compress, especially drums. And actually you can individually compress drums and then make them all send together into, let's say, number 5. You can do that. You don't actually have to. It's just kind of an option for people that want really compressed, like slamming drums, right? You can compress them all again in another bus and then send it to master. Like you can make these treat number 5 as master, and then master, like then it sends itself to the master, right? That probably confuses the hell out of everyone, but anyway, we'll just ignore that. That's just kind of an advanced technique. But we want to put compressors on things that we feel need it. You know, drums are supposed to be, like, especially when it's at a higher peak, you know, and especially when it's supposed to slam, we want it to kind of have low dynamic range individually. We want it to smack right up against the limit whenever it cracks, right? We don't want it to be there for a second. We want it to just kablamo, right? That's one of the biggest reasons of compressor. And yes, I did just say kablamo. Prosecute me. But yeah, so let's hear the difference again. We'll start with the compressor on, and then off. You can hear like kind of an overshoot of bass, right? With this, no more overshoot. Wow. What happens if we raise the ratio? We get even more compressed kick sound, right? But a bit of the slam goes away. The gain correction makes the slam even harder. Yeah, you don't want to change the attack much here. Quick attack is fine. Zero attack just means that as soon as it hits the level, it's already compressed, right? You want to have a little bit of overshoot, just to give some character to the sound. When it overshoots, it's not going to clip. It's compressed before it can get to that level. It just means that it'll have a bit of a sharper leading edge. But yeah, kick drum. It sounds crisper now. Here it sounds muddy. Yuck. See, compressor really adds its value. Another thing you want to compress is a snare. Mainly snare and kick drum are the things that you need to compress, because if you don't, then they just sound wimpy and they don't cut through the mix at all, right? Like if you've been making music since you started this, or if you made music in the past and right now you just want to learn more advanced things and you want to, know all these things completely, you might have had an occasion where your snare and kick drum, you can't hear them through the rest of the song, Sometimes it happens where suddenly your kick drum and snare disappear. You can't hear them, right? And one of the culprits, as well as like poor mixing, or not being mixed yet, so the volume levels aren't correct and all that stuff. One big thing is that it's a lack of compression. It doesn't slam up against that limit fast enough. It's not quite right, So it can't cut through the mix. It can't overpower the other sounds at all. So I'm going to crank up the ratio a bit. I think snare doesn't need to be compressed quite as much, or else it sounds weird. So let's hear what this sounds like anyway. Actually, you can tell when you're stressing out Fruity Limiter, and really you should turn off Fruity Limiter when you're doing this. To be honest, all master compressors, turn them off when you're compressing something else, because sometimes you'll compress something and crank up the gain and it will redline, it will clip, and you won't know because the limiter is stopping it from clipping. But also what the limiter does is when you have a sound that's really loud, it decreases the volume of everything around it. So instantly you have something that's completely overwhelming the mix, and you try so hard to fix it and it takes so long, right? When really you could just turn off the equalizer and make sure that nothing's redlining, and when you play it you'll have no problems. So really, when you're mixing, when you're compressing and everything, don't turn this on or this or any compressor on here. Don't turn them on until you're done with your gain, you're done with your volumes all across the board, you're done with your compression, and it sounds like nothing's clipping. It sounds coherent, it sounds nice, right? But it doesn't have quite enough punch. That's when you turn on the compressor and the fruity limiter, and then they do their jobs. But before then, they just ruin the sound of your project. So yeah, don't fall for that trap. That's what most people do. Most people have no idea. So anyway, as you can see, we're not really going over. Alright, that's another example of how mixing and changing the volumes can really drastically change the sound of things. I noticed that this clap sound is completely overshadowing the snare. So we raise it, so we can lower it to just the right levels, and it sounds better. But we'll try compressing this clap as well. I think it needs a bit of compression. It's like the sound, when it's a drum, it should just instantly go bam, right? It should smack right up against the top and then instantly go down again, right? I'm just going to run a compressor on this clap here. And really, you want a compressor for drums because they say this clap, its waveform, it's going to have a loudest point and the softest point, or it's going to increase in volume and then fall again. But that's every time it hits, right? What you want is that the entire thing just to bam, be right at loudest volume and then down again. You know, you want it to be compressed. It's kind of hard to explain why you want that so badly, but I mean, if you understand compressors, you know why, right? So let's lower the threshold a bit, increase ratio a bit, and see what happens, basically. That's all music production is, and I've said it a million times. It's just all trial and error. We're doing the does this sound good or bad test right now. Ooh. Now, it did nothing good for this, actually. I think the clap is only good as a highlight, because the clap doesn't even sound like a damn clap, and it never did. So, again, garbage in, garbage out, eh? Well, not really in this case. We know how to make it a bit better than garbage. We can make it like polished garbage. Sell it for a high price. Hell yeah. That's the very basics about compressors. But I just have to warn you, don't compress things too much, because then you just have a very unexciting track. If you turn on 3 compressors and a limiter and blah 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 blah, right? Even after you mix your track and you decide to just compress the shit out of it, it's gonna sound really lifeless, you know? Say your song is really loud and it's supposed to have a quiet part. The quiet part's going to be just as loud as the loud part, you know? How fun is that? Any fun? No. Music, it's not meant to be that way. And in the early 2000s, pretty much all music was that way. But these days, producers are getting back into the mind space, the head space, that super duper mega ultra loud is not always the best way to go, to be honest. But yeah. Density Mark III, really easy to use. You just throw on a preset until it sounds good. So, throwing that in. I'll go over how to install VSTs a bit later on. But yeah, again, if you run into any of the issues that I ran into, which is it tried to load anything I wanted to load in the mixer, it tried to load it as a channel. Like it tried to load it as one of these, and it gave me an error, and it's just being really stupid. But what you got to do is delete your plugin database on, like, in your FL Studio folder, which is weird, but it's what you have to do. It won't ruin anything. It would just fix your problem for some reason. Yeah, let me know if you have that issue with installing third-party plugins like this one. But yeah, anyway, with everything enabled here, let's see what it sounds like. Yeah, we got a really heavy kick here. Honestly, turning down the kick ruined everything, because then different other parts in the drum beat get accentuated, and it throws off the balance. Like I bounced it, and then just turning down the kick drum, even if you feel there's a bit too much bass, totally unbalances it. So it is just a balancing act. It's even called balancing, like changing the volumes of everything. If you change one volume, one key point in your mix, you turn it down or up, it throws everything off. Like, at least when you have a really well put together, coherent mix that you worked hard on, right? One little thing can throw it all off. And I've had occasions where I've like prototyped 20 or more times, just changing knobs, just mixing slightly differently. And I tried it 20 times. It was just number 7 that sounded the best. And I lost the project file for number 7. So complete mystery what I changed and what made it different. Yeah, well, there would be a dedicated video to mixing. This is all just kind of foreshadowing, because compression and EQ and gain control here is all part of mixing. It's all part of making all the sounds you've thrown onto the page sound decent together. That's what mixing is. Yeah, that has been about the compressor. If you really need a compressor, just try out Fruity Compressor. Mess with the ratio. You know, if you want really high compression, you never want it that high. Say high compression would be like 17 tops. It's still too high. But yeah, you mess with the threshold and gain if it needs to be louder, and whatever you want to do. Just mess around until something sounds good, and then roll with it. That is how music production works. And that's how music works, you know. Music can't be forced. It just has to kind of come out naturally. I'll see you in the next lecture.